Hello everyone. In this video we're going to be looking at locking grid items. So let's get to it. Okay, so in this video what I thought I'd do is follow on with the locking examples we saw in the previous video and look at some practical examples. So what I have on my screen right now is a whole bunch of grids, okay? And we have a bunch of items here that are highlighted in red. And these are to basically identify which items we're going to be locking in each of these grid examples. Now, for this first grid, what I want to demonstrate is row locking when the container is flowing in a row-based direction. So we're going to take these three items here on the far right, and we're going to lock them into row 1. And we'll see that they'll take priority. And for item 10, we're going to lock it into row 2. All right, so let's go about doing that. So my first selector here is targeting any item that is divisible by 4. So that's why it's 4, 8, and 12 here. And I'm just going to go grid row 1 and save. And as you can see, items 4, 8, and 12 are instantly locked into row 1 and they have priority over the rest of the items. Okay? Now for item 10, let's lock that into row 2 by just going grid row 2 and save. And now we can see item number 10 takes priority in row 2 over the rest of the items. Cool. So that's a row lock on a row flow grid. For the next example, we're going to do some row locking as well, but this is flowing in a column-based direction. So what will happen here is item 3 and 6 will not have priority in terms of the order in which they're placed. You'll just have to see that they'll have to move to the next location that's available to it, okay? So if I come down to my row lock column flow, I'm going to try and set item number 3 here to be in the second row. So if I save this, now we can see that item 1 and 2 still basically took those first two locations, which meant item 3 couldn't get into this location. So it had to move down the column, flow to the next column, and then finally find the next cell where it could be placed in the second row, which was here. Now, as a result of this, item number 6 is no longer in that second row like it was previously. So we have to force it. So we go grid row 2 for that as well, and save. And now you can see that gets buffered down too. But we can see that it still remains in the order of all the other items here. Cool. Now what about column-based flow with column locks? All right, so we're going to take item 4, 8, and 12 again, and we're going to lock them to the first column. And we're going to do the same for item number 10. We're going to lock that into the second column. So again, I have a selector for every fourth element. I'm going to go grid column 1 and save. And there you can see that 4, 8, and 12 take priority because they're in a column-based flow with a column-based lock. So they start off first and then everything follows after it. And then for 10, if I set that to a grid column of 2, then we can see that item 10 has priority in the second column and starts at the top. And then we go 2, 3, 5, and so on. Okay? Moving on, we're going to have a column lock with a row flow. So similar to what we saw with a row lock and column flow, you'll see that the order is preserved. So in this case, we're going to go for the third element. We're going to give it a grid column of, let's say, I think 2 in this case. Let's go with, 2 and save. And you can see that because 2 already had priority over 3 and was already filling that second column, item 3 had to go down to the next row to find the next available cell that was in column 2. All right, so that's why we get this spacing here. And then obviously 6 is offsetted again. So we'll go grid column 2 for that as well. And save. And now we can see 6 just shuffles over. Cool. And now we've looked at basically the 4 scenarios that we saw with row and column locking. But the one thing I didn't mention in the previous video is in regards to order. So even when items are locked to a specific row or column, they will abide by the auto modified document order. The difference is that the auto modified document order only applies to the items that are being locked. Okay, so in this case, say we're going to lock items 4, 8, and 12 into the first row here. Well, it means that these will still get priority over the rest of the items, but if I change the order value of any of these three, say in this case, we're going to change the order value of 8 to say -1 or something like that, that will actually still appear before 4 and 12. Whereas before, it was the physical placement of them in the DOM that indicated the order in which these would be placed. Okay, best to see that with an example here. So firstly, let's get it into the row. So we go grid row 1, and that gives us basically what we've seen before, with 4 being first, then 8, and 12. But if I now go order -1 on item 8 and save, well, we can see now that item 8 is first in these items that are being locked. Cool. Now this is the same scenario if we do it in a column-based direction. So if we take 4, 8, and 12 and we do exactly the same thing. So we'll go grid, column 1, put them in that first column there. And then once again, we'll set the 8th item to be -1 as well. And save. You can see that item 8 here is now first in those locked items. Out of those locked items, I should say. Cool. Now, the other thing that you may have thought about and may not have tried is when we have too many items that are locked to a specific row, then there are columns, right? So in this case, I've got 6 items, right? But we only have 4 columns. So if I lock all of these items here to the first row, they're going to span all the way across all the columns, right? But what happens here is because we have too many items, some implicit columns will be created. So let's see that in action. So if I go for this grid row 1, so this is for every second item that's in this container. We're seeing a grid row of 1. If I save this, now you get the situation where you've got the 6 items having to try and fit into row 1. So we've got the first 4 that fit into each explicit column, and then the last 2 had, well, 2 implicit columns had to be created in order to fit them in. Now, if there were a lot more than 6, say there were 10, then you would have 6 implicit columns that need to be created. And it goes on and on and on, depending on what you're doing, okay? Now, this is the same for columns as well. So if we come down to the next example and do the same thing, but this time we'll go grid column is equal to 1. Then you'll see that each of the items here, or the first 4, are in the explicit rows, but then 2 implicit rows need to be created to cater for those other 2 items. Cool. So that is pretty much all the scenarios I can think of in regards to row locking and column locking, but obviously we need to see an example, once again, of explicit positioning. Now, we've already done all this stuff in the past, but I thought we probably should go over it quickly again. So for this scenario, I'm going to basically position most of the elements into this bottom 4 section here, and then we'll probably have one here where item 7 is at the moment. So for item 2, what I want to do is I want to say, okay, I want to lock that item. So I'm going to use a grid area in this case to say I want it to start in row line 2, and I want it to start in column line 1, and then I want it to end on row, let's say 4, and then column, let's say 3. Now, if I run this right now, item number 2 basically starts at line 2 here, spans 2 columns and 2 rows. Cool. Now, we've created another implicit column as a result of doing this. Maybe we don't want this. Maybe we want the rest of these red items to kind of hover over the top of this one. So let's say for item number 4, we want to put that in the top left corner where 2 is, okay? So we might say something like this. We might go grid area, and we'll go row start 2, column start 1, and save. And that puts item 4 into that top left part of item 2, which is really just row 2, column 1. Okay, so we explicitly positioned it in the grid cell that maps to basically column 1, row 2. And then let's say for 6, I want to explicitly position that as well. We'll put that in basically the second column, second row here. So we'll just go grid area, and we'll go 2 for the row start and 2 for the column start, and save. And there you can see item number 6 is placed in that location. Now let's say we want to put 8 over here. All right, so we'll try and keep it in order. So here I'm going to go grid area. We're going to go row start of 3, column start of 1, and save. And now 8 is over here. And now we're back to our 4 columns by 3 rows grid. Now just to complete things, let's put 10 down here. So that can be done by just going grid area. We'll go, what's the number? 3 for row start 3, then 2 for column start 2, and save that. And now we can see item 10 is down there. So now grid item 2 is completely covered by these 4 items. And then let's say we're going to want to put item 12 in the third column, second row. All right, so where item number 9 is right now. So we can just do that by going grid area, second row, and we're going to finish at line 3 and save, I think. Yep. And there we go. All right, so we've been able to now explicitly position items 2 all the way to 12 into different locations within our grid. And that is all I want to cover in this video. So I'll see you all in the next one.